And we're back. It's the Sustainable Ministry Show. This is episode number 26. Where in the world is Stephen Ingram? All right, shall we begin?
Yeah, man.
All right. Hey, we are so glad to be back. Welcome, everybody. This is the Sustainable Ministry Show with Melissa Rao and Bryant Johnson. We will be joined with Stephen Ingram in just another week or two. He has been out of the country. And if you follow him on Facebook and see his pictures from Greece and a couple of the other places, one, they're beautiful. Two, I'm a little bit jealous. Did you travel outside of the country at all this summer, Melissa? What have you been up to? What have you been doing?
Goodness. I don't think I did. Isn't that sad? I have to remember. No, the summer has been kind of chill, but I am traveling outside the country later on this summer. We'll be cruising for our family vacation. We're headed to Cozumel and Montego Bay and Grand Cayman, which is a place I've never been before. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Have you done cruise before?
I have. I love them. I'm a huge fan. We've gone on like 3 or 4, so I'm really excited. But my daughter, I have to say, I have to brag on my daughter. She went to Africa to build a school, and so she got. That's why I'm like, did I go? No. That was my daughter, whom I live vicariously through.
That's fantastic. Where in Africa was she?
Senegal. She went to a village called Nahai, and it doesn't look anything like it sounds. And it was fascinating. She had an amazing experience, but she and a group of her friends from her school went kind of on a mission trip with a group called Build On to build a school. So they broke ground on a school for this village in Senegal.
And so I have a question for you then. You sent your daughter off to Africa, and there's something, you're her mom, you're her mother. Mm-hmm. How was that for you? Were you wrestling with that, sending her to another country, or were you pretty excited about it?
Yeah, no, I was excited for her, but let me tell you, she's 16 years old. And I mean, I've been on mission trips, but I've never been to Africa. It's just a continent that I have yet to step foot on. And I realized about 2 weeks before she left that this experience is something completely new that I have never experienced myself. And so even when we lived in New York City and she took the subway to school, that's not something I did, but I certainly took the subway. So I felt like I could prepare her. This was something that I have never experienced. So it was hard for me as a mom sending my kid out to experience something that I had no clue about. And I really wrestled with that. And so I remember just wrapping my hands around her, and I'm going to get choked up even talking about it now. But I said, you're going to do great work. Just remember that in all things, no matter what, the most important thing in life is your faith in Jesus and your relationship with him. And so don't forget who you are and don't forget who you're made to be. And that was it. Then I sent her on. It was like super emotional for me, but it was really great experience parenting and her coming home. It was amazing.
So I'm curious, was she in that moment with you, or was she like, oh, Mom?
No, probably a combination of both. I think she knew. She's one of those like old soul, mature kids that is very faithful, I think, I believe, I hope, I pray. And she gets it. So yeah, I think she was with me, but then I think she was also like, Mom, tell me something I don't already know, that type of thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, my summer, I also did not get to go out of the country this year, but we did move. We made a big move, and I know you guys have been through a move over this last year or so, and we were already in Winston-Salem, kind of temporary, and I was commuting back and forth to the church in Charlotte, Harrison United Methodist Church, that I've been serving at, and just tremendous. I'm going to miss them dearly. We have moved permanently to the Winston-Salem area and are staying up here. So I did step away from my position at Harrison I was sharing with you earlier and share with these folks too that this is the first time in 20 years I've not taken a trip over the summer with teenagers.
Mm.
And I have missed that as well. I got to, it was a pretty neat moment, got to step on the bus and pray for our students as they were headed out on a mission trip and pray for our volunteers as they were headed out on a mission trip this summer. Um, but this time I stepped off of the bus and went back into the church and sent them on their way. So that was an interesting transition to make. And then the other thing we've been doing this summer too, which is interesting for me, growing up in a church household where my parents were pastors, I just went to the church they worked at.
Mm.
And then in college, I went to the campus ministry, and then I started working in a church, and then I attended the church I worked at, and for the last 20 years have attended the church I've worked at. And for 10 years in my marriage, we have attended the church I worked at. And now this summer, we are looking for a home church. I don't even know where to begin really with that. It has been a new experience. And then working for Ministry Architects, where we are asked and invited into spaces to have a critical eye. I've also had to kind of like check that at the door too, and walk into the narthex, walk into the sanctuary, and just my mantra is, don't be critical, don't be critical, don't be critical, you know. And my wife is sometimes whispering that in my ear as we're sitting down in the pew. But that has been interesting too. The church that we've been attending this year, we have been so drawn to it for a number of reasons. We sit in the sanctuary and look around, and there are older families, there are younger families, there are small kids, there are teenagers in the sanctuary, in a traditional service. And that's something we want to be a part of, where there's multi generations. It's not as multicultural as we are used to. Certainly would love that, but there are multi generations. As we hear them talk about the work they're doing in the community, we hear all the ministries in the church are involved in it. That's something else that we can get behind.
That's
The interesting thing for us is every single week, and we fill out the attendance pad, and it's divided into two sections. One side has like for members to fill out, one side has for guests. And so every week we fill out the guest thing, and there's something inside me that just is hoping, like maybe they'll call this week. Maybe they'll call this week. And they haven't called us yet. They haven't followed up.
Oh no!
I know.
But you know what I have to say though, to kind of piggyback on that, I feel like some denominations and some specific churches utilize that technology and utilize that tool so much better than others do. In fact, like I can talk from personal experience. The Methodists and some Presbyterian churches kind of nail the whole friendship pad thing, right? Like it's like a thing you do at the peace or the announcement times where everybody just kind of signs in on that friendship pad, and the ushers will take them or whatnot. Like that's a system, right? So that's the first end. Then the middle part is making sure that after they're collected, that it goes to a secretary or administrator of some sort, and that the data is actually entered into the system and then tracked. So that's the third part, is that we have to run these reports. Who hasn't been coming? Who's new? Who needs to be reached out to, et cetera, et cetera. That's beautiful. But there are some denominations, and I'm going to say specifically Episcopal churches and Lutheran churches, that it's kind of like a faux pas to ask anybody to sign in. Like it just doesn't happen. And man, it really works well when it's worked. And so I just kind of, that we could, all our churches could figure it out. Like, how can we get this data? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the number. It's not just about the data, but it's about people. And it's about our ability to culture and nurture those, cultivate and nurture those relationships. But it typically will start with a tool.
Yeah. And how many times, I know at least churches have visited, usually when we're on site for an assessment, a family or a parent, some adult will say, we just aren't sure. We just aren't sure about the church because, when we've been absent, when we've been gone, they haven't followed up with us.
Right.
Nobody's called. And
Yeah.
so then they pull away. And I gotta believe that that every single one of those churches is not doing that intentionally. Like, I don't think at any point they're going, you know what, we're going to ask for people's information and then we're going to do nothing with it.
You'd be shocked. No, I think that happens. I think that happens. Or you know what? Sometimes they'll go the second step and put it into the system, but for nothing. So if the reports aren't actually triggered, well, then
Right.
it's just we're collecting data, and that's fine. That's better than nothing, But it kind of stinks.
Yeah, yeah. But it's one of
Yeah,
those things where, like, I guess the church has got to ask, what's the ministry we want? Um, what do we hope for in the church? And then what are we going to do to get there? Because
yeah,
whatever the outcome is, there's got to be a process to get to it, and sometimes it's changing that process. And I think in our case, like, um, you have a guest come in and you fill out the thing, attendance tracking and the friendship pad. I mean, I almost feel like, just forget it. Like, don't even include it in the thing if you don't follow up on it. I don't. It's like that parable of the lost sheep. The important part
yeah,
is that they followed up with the lost sheep.
yeah. Like
But
Jesus didn't just say, "Oh, that sheep's missing."
right.
He went and got him.
I've noticed we have 99 now. I think that's okay. Um,
Shucks. But isn't that funny? That's kind of what we do, right?
oh, it's so
Like,
true.
I know, like, well, no, but that's not what we do. That's what lots of people do in churches. I mean, how often I know it's typical and it's standard that in the place that you don't have the friendship pad, there are ushers who are at least going around and head counting. They're counting the people in the church,
Yeah.
and they're making a little note of it in their little worship thing back in the sacristy or whatever. But then what? Then what? And so, Bryant, I'm just curious. You've been going to the church you really kind of love. You kind of dig it. How then do you kind of say, hey, but what about me? I'm just curious. Do you have thoughts about how you're going to go about that?
Yeah.
Not to put you on the
Yeah.
spot.
Yeah, part of it is like, and I've kind of been wrestling with when to do this. I think at some point, I'll just call, right? Like, I'll
Mm-hmm.
call the pastor, I'll call the pastor of education there that's at the church. I'll just call and introduce myself and tell them a little bit about who we are and see where that goes. Um, maybe it's selfish, like at some level. We haven't done it yet. Uh, and this is more me, not my wife. We haven't done it
Yeah.
yet because I think, like, oh, maybe this week they'll notice. Like, maybe this week they'll
Oh,
call, and it's
yeah.
terrible, terrible. I should just pick up the phone at some point. But
Well,
I think that has got to be there, and maybe at some point in that conversation to be able to say, in a healthy way, and not in a way that is, I don't know, demeaning to the church by any means. Um, that, hey, there's a piece that's missing, um,
sure.
right? There's a piece that's missing, and so how can I help be a part of that? How can we
Yeah.
help correct that? Um,
Have you seen some better things to do than not? I'm thinking of some specific ways that churches can follow up with either first time visitors or what we will call member inactive or missing in action
yeah.
folks. Have you seen some creative ways that churches can indeed follow up with those folks?
Well, it's gotta. I mean, you pointed out the data stuff, the data, the record keeping. I think there's three things. It's one, like, okay, so how do we get the information? Two, we got to enter the information. Then three, what do we do with it when it gets spit out?
For sure.
So, like, one, are we spitting out the information? If we're collecting that, then what do we, like? Who's printing the report?
Yeah.
Is it an attendance record? Is it just a list of all new people? Is it a list of folks who've been gone for some point, for some point period of time is what I'm trying to say. And then from there, we've got to make contact. Um,
Mhm.
I know there's clever ways. I've seen some churches, at some point, number of absences that will just kind of drop by the house and see how things are going. Somebody who's been connected through a Sunday school class or through a small group, and they activate that piece. I know some other churches that are intentional about, okay, if somebody new signs up on the pad and they place their address, they get a visitor that afternoon, that Sunday afternoon or the next day, which is really aggressive. You know, really aggressive.
So are you not a fan of that?
I personally, no. Unless there's chocolate chip cookies involved, I might be a little more.
Oh,
Welcoming.
okay.
But yeah, I think ultimately what it comes down to though is just got to be contact.
Yeah.
A phone call, something, and if we're talking about MIAs, I think the conversation on the follow up is not like, "Hey, we've missed you. When are you coming back?" I think that conversation is about like, "How's it going? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on in your world, Melissa? What's life attacking you with, and how are you dealing with that? If you've been involved in this church and active, and now you're not, something's happened.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's bad. It could be that your child is in soccer and you're at the tournaments for the last 3 weeks, and all of that is wonderful. But I think the conversation has got to be about like, hey, how's it going? How's your life? What's going on in your world? And then at some point that may lead into an invitation. But I don't think the
Yeah.
invitation's a call. I think it is, if we go back to the parable of the lost sheep, I think it's just caring for the sheep.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. What about you?
Now,
Have you seen some things work?
well, I have, and it's so funny. I feel like it needs to be a multifaceted approach to following up with folks, but um, there's some churches that do really cool things for their visitors. Everybody says, where's the visitor parking? If you have a big parking lot, I know some churches have those kind of parking lot ushers. I forget what they're called, but maybe But I'm pretty sure, like even Stephen Ingram, I really wish you were here to
Yeah.
kind of tell us. Like I believe that there are some churches that need to kind of direct traffic, and they're kind of like the front lines, even before the nursery workers. So there's some different things. You got to make sure your signage is good. I know we're talking about missing in action and first time visitors, but I think the worst thing a church can do is not be a good communicator with where things are. And so signage is a good welcoming thing that you can do. But what's that process look like? And when does a first timer become yours?
Yeah.
When and by what is that process? Like, okay, they're welcomed. Who's welcoming them the first time? Do they get a bling bag or a gift bag? Is there, information that the church can be putting together to give people so that they're armed and equipped with, who the church is, what they're about, and welcoming them back? Is a pastor calling them? Is another parishioner calling them? I love the visit thing. Maybe not for a visit, but a delivery of either flowers or cookies is a great idea. That just shows someone, a family, that you care about them and you're going the extra mile. But I think in terms of missing in action, I think it's important that pastors are aware, but more so than pastors, I think the members, congregation members, maybe there's a process in place that the church can say, hey, so and so hasn't been coming for a while, or this family hasn't been coming for a while. Would you mind following up with them rather than having a pastor follow up? And I think it's simply a matter of perception. When I'm gone and the pastor notices I'm gone, I think in my head, well, he's paid to care. Like, I know that's silly, but it's his job to notice that I'm gone. And it's
Sure.
kind of his job as the shepherd to come and get me. But gosh, it means so much more to me when a fellow parishioner or congregation member is the one who actually follows up and says, "Hey, I've missed you over the last few weeks. is everything okay?
Yeah.
So I feel like it needs to be both. It's not just one or the other. Um, yeah. So that's just my very strong opinion on that.
Yeah. It, this is it created this like image and this really terrible pun in my mind as you're talking about that, because going back to the parable again, it would be so different for that one sheep that walked off if Dolly the sheep was like, hey, did you notice? Did you notice that the Johnsons haven't been here in a while? And
Well,
and then the pun is, so why don't you go follow up with him? You get it?
yes, I get it. I get it. EW. I think what's even funnier is that you called the sheep Dolly and then gave her a really, really low voice. Anyway, anywho.
That's amazing.
But you're right. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of empowerment. And I think in today's world, and I would love to talk, maybe we spend another episode talking about staff dependency and how it's kind of crippling our church a little bit. When we abdicate our authority as ministers to one another, to either the pastor or paid people, I feel like we're bounding ourselves and that we are the hands and feet of Christ. But when we abdicate our authority in that, I think we're limiting the ability for ourselves to reflect God's love to one another. And so I feel like our job as paid staff or as clergy is to really empower the body. And that would be giving them the information they need in order to minister to one another. And so I loved your you pun. I think that was fantastic. But I wish we could do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crucial. It's crucial to the ministry. Actually, what I'm thinking is, why don't we just pause here in the conversation? It is fall. Some folks are already back in school. Churches are getting back into this fall rhythm, which means I think, right, families are going to get back active in the life of the church. Probably over the next month or two, a lot of churches are going to see a rise in attendance, weekly participation, and people are setting their patterns for this school year as they get prepared for that. So if you're in a church, if you work in a church, if you're a pastor in a church, and you just feel like there's some piece of this communication thing, this MIA thing, this first-time visitor thing that's missing, what the system is, what the solution is not as important as making sure that you have a solution in place and then working that solution. The tweaks that will come along with that, you'll find throughout the year. But now's the time to get that plan set up. Now's the time to make sure that if you're tracking first-time visitors or guests, that you've got a way to follow up with them, so that people aren't missed. I still don't think it's the church's intention to leave people out. Maybe there's a couple, maybe, but
Maybe.
but I think churches as a whole want people involved and want their folks to know that they're cared for and important to them. So this is one of those ways, following up with people who've been missing and following up with folks who are the first-time visitors is important. And we did get a bling bag at the church, and that's another thing that we loved. Had a Bible in it, in fact. Had a Bible and little pamphlets of the different ministries that's happening in the church. So they're not ignoring first-time visitors. They're not ignoring guests by any means.
That's right.
They're really invested in that. So, Melissa, where can people catch up with you? I think you're going to the Simply Conference here shortly in a couple weeks, right?
I am. I'm going to be at Simply Youth Ministry Conference, and that's in October, I believe. I wish I knew the exact dates.
5, 6, 7, or 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 9.
7, 8, yeah.
Weekend.
Yes.
It's a weekend in those numbers.
It's the first full weekend in October.
Yeah.
And I'll be partnering up with our friend and colleague Stephanie Caro and doing a half track for small church youth ministry there. And I'm also going to be leading a workshop about church politics and conflict mediation and transformation. I'm excited about that. Yeah.
That should be a real easy class.
It's a toughie.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be there too. still kind of
Yay.
working all that out, but I'm planning to be at the conference as well, and I'm hoping. I didn't mention this earlier, but I got to do some coaching with Koza Baptist Church in Okinawa, Japan earlier.
Wow. How cool.
Yeah, earlier this month. And Jody, if you're listening, I know you said you're going to be at this Simply conference, and I'm hoping to be there. We can meet face to face and connect. That would be awesome. So how can people I can't talk. How can people keep up with you, Melissa? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Facebook. I believe it's just Melissa Rao, and I am on Twitter at, I believe it's Melissa Rao. And my email address is melissa@ministryarchitects.com.
Fantastic. And I am Bryant Johnson. I am also on the Facebook at facebook.com/Bryant Johnson, and Instagram, same. Twitter is the B Johnson. And then email is Bryant@ministryarchitects.com. We're so excited for season 2 of the Sustainable Ministry Show. We've got a lot, I think, coming, a lot that we're excited about. I'm excited for Stephen to join us. And if this is your first time listening, please subscribe on iTunes. Check out the video on YouTube. You can subscribe there too. We're really, really close to a number on YouTube that then we can have like youtube.com/the Sustainable Ministry Show. So if you go there and subscribe, that is a little free bonus with subscribers there. But subscribe, follow us, interact with us on Facebook. We will be posting these there so that you can join us in the conversation as well. Thanks so much.